Welcome back to another review of a classic title. I'm Captain Cesaris, and I'm joined again by Seven Saturn and President Magikarp. Before we start, I have to say I fear this review could be a little bit long because we have a lot to say about this title. This time we look at Star Trek Elite Force from the year 2000, which also got an expansion pack in 2001. During the end of Voyager's 6th season, the story lets you play as Alexander Monroe, a member of the newly formed Hazard Team, a new special security unit, created to deal with the threats the crew has to face in the Delta Quadrant. At the beginning of the story, the ship is trapped in a starship graveyard, heavily damaged and under attack from an unknown hostile force. The Hazard Team has to protect the Voyager as the crew makes repairs and investigate the cause of the entrapment. After you are done with the main story, you can continue exploring the USS Voyager in the expansion pack's Virtual Voyager mode. Since the game uses the Quake engine, you of course also have an amazing multiplayer part, which we will discuss a bit later. So, our first order of business would be, when did you guys first buy it?
So me personally, I had a similar purchasing experience with Elite Force as I did with Armada, actually slightly worse. When Elite Force came out, I was very young. So my parents bought it for me because Voyager was the show that we grew up every Wednesday. We'd watch it together on UPN. It just was a family ritual. And I was so excited for Elite Force. I got it on PC, I got it on the PlayStation 2, and then later on I got the Star Trek Action Pack, which had Elite Force and its expansion pack again. So in total, I wound up owning the game 3 times over.
Well, for me, the situation is a little bit easier. I believe I had it a few months after the release. Cannot say exactly when, but rather early. And funny thing is, I also ended up buying it a second time, but only because I wanted to have the expansion pack. At the time, the expansion pack wasn't for sale alone, where I had it from, but only in a combination pack. So I ended up buying Elite Force a second time, including the expansion pack. But in general, I don't find it a real problem because it just comes naturally to have both. Because in my personal experience, the game just got better by the expansion pack. So having Elite Force without the expansion pack isn't just the right feeling, I believe. So I think I did well.
Yeah, because I mean, a big portion of owning the expansion pack for fans was that originally when Elite Force launched, they didn't have Jerry Ryan doing the role of 7 of 9. They had another voice actress stand in for her. And then by the time the expansion pack rolled around, they had managed to get Jerry Ryan to record her lines as 7 for the game. So the expansion pack really was kind of like a required thing to get the most enjoyment out of the game for someone who's a fan of the show.
Oh, and on top, do not forget the ability to walk around on the Voyager, the virtual Voyager maps, or the kind of another small single-player-like experience only on the Voyager starship.
I make a short sidestep after I tell you when I bought it, which was also a few days after release. I was also in the Voyager hype basically back then. We had in Austria the release basically of the 5th or 4th season of Voyager, and I really needed to get this game immediately, and I had many first experience with this game, like multiplayer and the walk on the Voyager. It was basically mandatory for me, and I always have it on my PC. The good thing is now you can get the game for free, at least the multiplayer aspect is for free now. And to go back to Jerry Ryan, in the German version we had the luck that from the first release, we already had the original German synchronization voice of 7 of 9, basically. So we didn't have this experience.
Yeah, that's still something that blows my mind, is that Star Trek is experienced completely differently depending on where you're from, just because the voices and the characters can present themselves so much differently. But it was really big for us here in America to have Jerry Ryan doing the voice of 7 of 9, because the woman that they had standing in for her, I mean, God bless her for trying, but she did not do a great job.
Thinking about it, I never really did this, but one day I really have to do a complete vanilla experience and hear her original in-game voice.
I don't think you'll find a whole lot of footage of it, and I don't know if you'll have much luck finding version 1.0 floating around the internet or even on disc form nowadays, but suffice to say, it was not the greatest.
Well, for me, it shouldn't be a problem. The German version also includes the English version, so maybe I have it already there. So, let's move on to the multiplayer modes. The original game only included modes like Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, but with the expansion pack we got also Action Hero, in which one player spawns with all the weapons, has additional health and the ability to regenerate. Should he be killed, the killer gets it all. Then you have Assimilation. Here the Borg players have to assimilate the other team and must protect the Borg Queen. Disintegration, a deathmatch mode with the difference that here every shot kills. Next you have Elimination, where players don't respawn after they get killed, so basically a last man standing. And the last mode would be Specialties, a class-based mode in which you have to choose between 6 different roles like Demolition, Heavy Weapon, Infiltrator, Medic, Sniper or Technician. So guys, which modes do you prefer?
So for me personally, I would say that my favorite way of playing Elite Force was probably Disintegration Capture the Flag, just because it turned into an absolutely chaotic mess of who was dying, who had the flag. You could be gone in a moment's notice, and it was absolutely wild. But Assimilation, if you have a large group playing it, is also super cool, because you can you have one person playing as the Borg and they have to try and kill the other players to turn them into Borg drones and expand their team. And I think there's a time limit component to it too. So if the Borg don't assimilate everyone within the time limit, then the humans win. Otherwise, it's the Borg win if they get everybody.
I also prefer basically to play Assimilation, but the sad part is you need a big group for that. You can't do it with 3 or 4 people. Also, the Elimination mode was kind of pointless, I think. They tried to emulate Counter-Strike back then, I guess, but they failed miserably. Otherwise, I would say Capture a Flag and even Action Hero are my 2 favorite mods.
I mean, Action Hero is pretty good, but then you run into the problem where if someone who is very good at the game gets the Action Hero, it suddenly becomes a lot less fun.
Yeah, I'm afraid I know the experience from the other way around. I mean, of course, you try to win a match, and once you are Action Hero, you already have a certain advantage. And if you are playing the game rather well without that addition, then it's really, really boring for others or really frustrating. And the sad part is, I believe it is rather difficult to play bad on purpose just to not become the Action Hero. And once you are the Action Hero, well, it's not fun for the others. So yeah, if there is a big gap between certain players and other players, then this mode loses its attraction. And in general, I would say this is exactly why Capture the Flag is just cool, because you can combine your teams properly. You can balance them by yourself if you feel like it, or if it isn't necessary, you just have equally sized teams and you're done. But Capture the Flag really lives from the map you are using. There are some maps that are really, really huge, and which you will really have to know how to play, because otherwise you're just stumbling around and looking for the map spots and how to intercept enemy players with the flag. If you don't know the map, it's really a challenge. So Capture the Flag as a mode is cool, but you will have to know what maps you can play with certain players.
But I would say this is true for every mode. Maybe not Deathmatch, because you can play that on every map, but as you mentioned, Action Hero, there are some maps which is very hard to find the Action Hero even, and have the right equipment to kill him. Other maps it would be easier, for especially I just seen the stream video, if you have the bomb and you catch him in the right moment, it shouldn't be a problem.
Oh, the Death Pack, that was so much fun, especially when you played in deathmatch modes, where you would be running around the map and you'd have like everyone focusing on you. You could just drop the bomb and take everyone out.
Well, that's especially fun on Capture the Flag 2, I believe. I believe one of the the most played tricks on others is placing the ultricium charge below the flag spot if this flag spot is somehow elevated. And on the standard maps, this is the case. You either have the maps, the flag spot above something, or you have it below another floor. And this is really very common to place the charge somewhere. And if someone is taking your flag, just press your execution command button and he drops it immediately.
Do we mention any other mode?
Well, I would say that specialization or specialty or whatever they called that mode is probably the most underwhelming one in the game, just because it kind of separates you into different classes, but it doesn't change the fundamental gameplay. And some are more useful than others just because the photon burst for the heavy weapons guy is just so hilariously broken, especially in smaller maps, that you really don't have a whole huge reason to play anything else.
I guess with the expansion pack, they tried to include as many modes as possible from different games. Because if you look, assimilation you already had in another game, specialties was basically Team Fortress, elimination was basically Counter-Strike. So they grabbed quickly a lot of modes from other games and included it. And I think they really didn't think it really through the specialties. If the team combination, how they did it, makes a lot of sense. Elite
Force included a lot of modes. You must always remember that they had competition. I mean, if you think about Unreal Tournament, they had even more variety with the 2004 version. But I believe also UT99 already had a lot of modes, and in a way it is just a question of competition. If you have just only playing Capture the Flag and Deathmatch and maybe Team Deathmatch, the game isn't really a good competition to that regard. I mean, yeah, it makes fun, but if you can play more things with another game, then of course you will have a bad stand at this point. So it makes sense to include a lot of modes and of course kind of do the copycat in a way.
Definitely, but I think I would have liked a little bit more patching afterwards. Integrating more modes, just dropping a lot you have, the most you have basically, then don't support it, it's a little bit odd. Maybe they didn't have the time or the money, whatever, we'll never know. But I guess it wouldn't hurt that they got in contact with the community and asked for feedback. What do you like, what you don't like, how can we improve it? And I didn't feel that back then from this development team.
Elite Force kind of, as much as it was competing with other shooters of the time, it did kind of have the luxury of being a Star Trek game. So it was always going to have its own following regardless of how it stacked up to the others.
Yeah, quite true. Quite true. They didn't have to compete with even other franchises back then. Yeah, I would say since we do a pro and con section later, let's move on to the history aspect of the game. Basically, how did you experience in the States the first year of the game?
Well, for us, most of the enthusiasm surrounding the game was about the multiplayer. As much as everyone here loved the single-player campaign and how authentic it was to the games, as authentic it was to the series, the multiplayer is really where the game stood out because, even amongst its competition at the time, if you look at unmodified Elite Force with an objective lens, the weapon selection, aside from maybe the scavenger rifle and arguably the grenade launcher, the weapon rotation was actually surprisingly well balanced. And it fostered a really diverse community of people who were playing the game to compete with each other. And then there were even alternative mods and different modes of play that sprung up. Like, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the RPGX mod, but that was something that came about around 2003, 2004, where people weren't just playing Elite Force to, shoot at each other within the context of Star Trek, but there was also a huge role-playing community online that was fostered by Elite Force.
Yeah, it's quite amazing that an FPS game would turn into a RPG game. It really surprised me back then when I first heard about this.
Oh yeah, even just until 2017, I was helping with development of that particular mod. I mean, it's still got new content coming out for it. It's amazing how dedicated the community is for Elite Force even now. And one of the most impressive things to me is that this November will have been the game's 20th year. It will have been 20 years since Elite Force released, and even to this day that there's so much enthusiasm around it, I think is a testament to how well made and good the game was.
I heard about the RPGX project, but I never got sadly into it. I would say basically in the German area it wasn't that popular. Of course we have German sites who played it, but for some reason I was isolated from that group. We had a big German website called Hazard Team. They had a collection of all the mods, entire list of all clans which are based in Germany and Austria, and had a lot of tips and tricks, everything you can imagine, and of course a forum. So a kind of small-sized Elite Force files, and sadly it's now offline. You can't reach the website any longer.
Oh yeah, the mod community of Elite Force was fantastic and really kept the game so lively for years, and still does to this day.
I never was into the original Elite Force community. Back then I didn't have any internet connection, so of course I never did any multiplayer. But what struck me really as cool was the sheer amount of maps. Up to today there are many maps, and even today some new maps are added, rarely, but some are still being released. And the variety was just awesome. And of course the really cool parts were when someone kind of redid the show in some respect, or created a certain setting. I believe on my own server there are currently 2 maps which are at least very derived or almost the same as 2 Counter-Strike maps, Counter-Strike 1.5 back then, and there was so much love for the game to create maps and to do content, and not just the mods were a lot, but as I said, the sheer amount of, or the sheer number of maps is really cool. And something really sad from my point of view is that the repositories, there were some map repositories back then, are simply lost. I'm not sure how much of the data was recovered somehow or stored somewhere else, but still there are a lot going around, and some servers have I believe more than 2 gigabytes of maps laying around, and if you are completely through, I believe you have a week of playing or something like that, and it's just cool.
Yeah, that's the sad part, that with the sites gone, the old sites like EF files or Hazard Team, nobody has everything. We only have a fraction of the content which was up there, and now it's basically lost.
Bringing it back to the multiplayer, one of my biggest personal missions with releasing the latest Elite Force multiplayer client through the last outpost was integrating as many high quality mods as I could find, and if there were some mods with some rough edges in there, to sort of polish those off myself and deliver the highest quality experience I could. Now, I'm not going to say that it has everything, but I think I did a pretty good job of preserving a really high quality experience with what I could scour from the internet, because I'm right there with you. It's a tragedy that so much of Elite Force's community mod history has been lost to time, but I tried to the best of my ability to preserve that for people who might check it out nowadays. And I hope that for those of us that have been around for a while, that it kind of reminds us of the magic that used to happen in this community.
Was this always the goal for you, to preserve everything, or did you just wanted to have a an easy way to play the game for others and yourself?
It was both. I wanted to make sure that Hollow Match remained accessible to as many people as possible. To that end, I just expanded. It used to be a Windows-only client, but now we just released one for Linux as well. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to expand that to Mac OS. And in addition to making it accessible and easy to play, I also wanted to make sure that our community history lived on through the client, that the expansive mod support and all the user-made content would have a home, and that it wouldn't be lost to time. So it's as much a labor of love for the game and letting people play it as it is letting people experience the history of its community.
And how did you get the rights to make this?
Well, it started for me originally with RPGX. We had a special engine fork to expand the number of entities so that people could develop more complicated multiplayer maps and experiences for the mod. And we had an installer, but in my opinion, it wasn't particularly high quality. So what I did for RPGX was I collected all of the mods and maps I could find and properly attributed them to the creators and sort of packaged it into one all-in-one download that became known as RPGX Ultimate Edition. And then I thought to myself, how come no one's really done this for Hollow Match yet? I mean, there was another community, and I think there still is, United Federation of Planets, that had their own Hollow Match installer, but I can't attest to any experience with it. What I wanted to do was sort of create a curated best of package with Hollow Match, because The Last Outpost since 2012 has had an agreement with CBS and Raven Software to distribute the Elite Force multiplayer code and assets. And it occurred to me that, we're doing all of this stuff for RPGX, but let's not forget where we came from. We have the ability to create a Hollow Match client that probably a wider audience has a lot more nostalgia for. Let's take advantage of it. So then one day I just decided, you know what? I'm going to package all this together and I'm just going to throw it out there and see what happens. And it had a lot of enthusiasm on the Star Trek communities on Reddit and around that circle of the internet. So over the last couple of years, I've still been slowly progressing towards developing it a little bit further.
The funny thing is, the captain and me, we also were thinking about doing something very similar, because in our experience, one of the problems of many old games, including Elite Force, is how to get them to run. You may think, okay, Elite Force is a game that works rock solid. That's true, once you get it to run. And the idea was to do something very similar. Take the content that works and pack it together in a way that is easily deployable. And I believe that's really the hard part, to create a package that is easily deployable for someone who has no idea how to set this game up, but still contain a lot of high quality content, even from a technical point of view. And this is something we never really overcame, because we were thinking, well, writing an own installer is a little bit more than we want to do, but the idea itself was still sound. So I'm really happy that someone took the advantage of the CMod and combined it with the original Elite Force, because if you think about it, Elite Force now is 20 years old, and of course in the original game there were a lot of bugs and also security problems, and they were all fixed. I'm not sure if I'm taking something too early here, but the IO Quake engine, which is based on the code released from the creators from ID Design, gave us the opportunity to create our own binaries. And in principle, as someone already pointed out, Elite Force is basically Quake, just expanded a little bit. They added certain smaller features to it, and if you did the same merging of those features into the IO Quake engine, then you got Elite Force, but without those bugs, without those security problems. And today we are in a situation to have a recent version of Elite Force, and this shows how active the community actually still is. I mean, it's not just playing around with this like a toy, but also maintaining it, improving it. And this is something that I find really amazing when it comes to the point that, the game is 20 years old. There are not many games that can claim that.
Yeah, like being 20 years old and still having an active community is insane. And I feel fortunate and privileged to be a part of it.
Since you mentioned active community, I have to disagree with that statement. I will come a bit later to that, but I start with how I met Seven Saturn, basically. Back in 2016, I had a standard website with TeamSpeak and everything, and one day Seven Saturn just logged in and we started to discuss the current situation of Elite Force. And we thought it's so sad that so many different communities are out there and nobody is communicating with each other. Everyone has basically his own small island and they don't want to interfere with the other ones. So we thought maybe we try to create a place for everyone, basically, where it doesn't matter which clan you belong to. As the only important thing is that you have somebody to talk to and to play the game, basically. So we started to basically write, I think, 20 or 30 clans which we could find on the web, and maybe we got 4 or 5 replies, and our first game had around 8 to 10 players, which was for us a good success, basically. But after this first game, the players didn't come any longer. And we tried to make different approaches, like the map pack. I wrote an info guide on moddatabase.com to boost a little bit everything. Also in 2017, Chris Stahl, modder for Elite Force 2, made the Elite Force Discord server, which I hoped would boost a little bit the community, but also there is no big picture. That's the sad part for me in the community.
Well, see, that was part of what I wanted to do this year, especially with getting the updated client with the working master servers and better support for modern operating systems, is I wanted to really push the 20th anniversary of Elite Force to the greater Star Trek community, especially on our Star Trek. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the broader Star Trek discussion community on sites like that, but I want to say at least like 2 or 3 times a month, there's going to be people posting highly upvoted and high traffic content about people and their nostalgia for the old Star Trek games of yore. And I feel that in making this simple, easy to deploy program with a lot of high quality curated mod content, as well as maybe a trailer of some sort that I'm going to be working on to push the image that, you know, this game is still around. It's easier to play than ever. All you have to do is click install if you're on Windows. You know, let's get together. Let's get everyone going. I feel that part of the challenge of introducing new people to the Elite Force community, at least until recently, was the accessibility. Because a lot of people don't know that the multiplayer portion is more or less just completely free to legally play now. And there hasn't really been a whole lot of coordination between the communities. Admittedly, which I am partially responsible for, because to be honest with you, I wasn't completely certain who was still actively playing the game and where to go for places like that. But I think now is definitely the time, with the anniversary milestone, to push the game, now that it's easier to get at than ever. And hopefully we should be able to get some activity going out of this. At least that's what I'd like to see.
You see, that's a bit of the funny part. I was discussing, as the captain already pointed out, we were really trying to contact people, and still today I'm not sure what is the proper approach to get the people back together. As the captain pointed out, the community is kind of fractured. You have RPGX, you have United Federation of Planets, there's also the Skunkies, there's us playing the game, and actually I believe in absolute numbers there are still a lot of people wanting to play this game and actually do play the game. And then again, if you look, for example, at the Skunky clan, I'm not sure if you know them, they created some sort of installer quite a while ago, and what me personally kept from it was that this was a really big bunch of files. I mean, you had to download, I believe, 2 gigabytes of maps just to get the game started. And the reasoning behind it was that they said, well, of course you could create servers which just serve the map and you can download it there during the game, but it would create too much load. And I was thinking, well, a little bit slimmer version, something that isn't that big and honky, might also do the trick. And I'm not quite sure what really goes here, if it is something about deploying the content, making it easily accessible, or if it is in fact a game that has a nostalgia factor, but once you are competing against other activities like playing current games, latest games, I'm not sure if it really is a competition. I'm not quite sure, because we really tried for a while to get people to play the game, and it's difficult. So I love the idea you have, and I really hope you can pull this off, because we failed 2 or 3 times, and still I believe there's potential.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the other day on the PC Gaming Discussion Hub on Reddit, less than 24 hours ago, there was a fairly popular thread where there were 148 people commenting what happened to all the great arena shooters like Quake, and there's still absolutely a general broader appeal for something like this, because there are plenty of people that are nostalgic for the feeling of an arena shooter, and even within the Star Trek community, people who are nostalgic for Elite Force and the experiences they had in years gone by. And by packaging all of these maps and mods in with the game, of course, properly attributed to their creators, and just making it accessible and really making a big push to like make people aware this is something that is available to you right now. If you want to relive those experiences, there is nothing stopping you from doing it legally. There's nothing stopping you from doing it today. Everything is all out on the table. All you have to do is click download and run the setup. That's it. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it is that simple, and it's just something that we have to make them aware of. And I have some very talented people with a dedication to Elite Force that are working with me to bring that vision to life and hopefully create the most exciting, nostalgic presentation we possibly can to bring people back for the 20th anniversary.
I believe also the social aspect is very important. I mean, back then in 2002, 2003, there was a big community playing the game. A lot of people hanging out together digitally, and an important part, I believe, would be the Discord. The captain already mentioned it. There's a Discord which has Elite Force as main topic, not just 1, but also Elite Force 2. And in principle, if you want to play a game and there's nobody on, I believe it's rather easy. Just go in there, ask, hey guys, somebody up for a game or something like that, and the platform is there. We already have the material. So this is why I say, yeah, of course, we have the potential here, and we just kind of have to try and get it to work. And if you have a lot of people out there which are interested in pushing this, I'd love to see this happen. I mean, we tried and failed, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it cannot be done. I believe there are many opportunities here. As you say, the date itself, if you say, yeah, the game has 20th anniversary, but then again, as sad as the coronavirus right now is, it's also an opportunity to get people back, because, well, if you're sitting at home and feeling nostalgic, as you pointed out, just get the game, play it. And if you can't find someone, go to Discord and ask the people, hey guys, how is it? Want to play a game?
Yeah, and one of the biggest benefits of being such an old game with so much history behind it is that there are so many resources available for people who want to start their own servers, people who want to build their own community, or, you know, start making their own content. There's just so much on offer here, where even though the game is 20 years old, there's still plenty of new life to be built and extracted from it. And I'm hoping that this coordinated effort that I'm working on to get everyone sort of back in the mindset of playing Elite Force, that we can pull it off and start getting healthy numbers going again.
Yeah, we have basically not only have to work together, I would say, but also maybe we have to make kind of a roadmap how to approach this whole thing. I think it would be good to have a combination, the fixed date, the 20th anniversary of the game, but also some points between now and there. So basically a lot of people can hear about this. If we only make one goal, maybe a lot will miss it.
And ideally, what I'd like to do is get everyone together on a server, rotating through different maps and game modes, collect as much footage as possible, and really work to get the material together to make a worthwhile trailer for presentation to the greater Star Trek community.
That's funny, because this is pretty much what we were trying to do. If you look at the channel of the captain, then you will find certain videos, and this is pretty much what we did. We made small events, small just because, well, they weren't having many players, but in principle we did exactly what you said. We had a first bigger game, as the captain already said, and there were 8 to 10 players or something, and this was exactly what we were thinking. Show the people what is going on, how the game feels, what the activity there is, and make people kind of wanna play it. And I believe what you said is really the big issue, how to get a lot of people to play at the same time, because my server is running 24/7. It rotates different maps, different mods, different modes, and yeah, the sad part really is people aren't playing it. So the tricky part, I believe, is to get people to notice it, and well, to be interested, I believe.
Also, don't forget about it. We often had good feedback about our ideas, our videos and everything, but when we came close to an event, often the people, sorry, I already have an appointment on this date, I can't, sorry. So we have to really push for it, I guess, on multiple levels, Reddit, YouTube.
And that's the plan. Hopefully we can pull it off.
And if you would like to collaborate on this project, we would be up for that. And I also had in mind to make an anniversary game night, basically.
Oh yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you some material that we've made in the past to sort of give you an idea of the kind of vibe that I'm going for with this trailer. And hopefully we can get something good thrown together. I'd like to ideally get this done by halfway through next month, but that might not be completely feasible. But it's definitely, I think I can get it done if I have support from other people to help me build up the material.
Yeah, sure. I'm up for it always. We have also always the plans to make new content and new strategies, basically. And our next goal would be an event in the next few weeks, I would say. So we have more footage maybe also to record.
Yeah, that would be great. See, one of the things that we're trying to leverage ideally is we already have an existing agreement with CBS and Raven Software, and we plan on reincorporating as a not-for-profit limited liability company here in America within the next few months. And we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we might be able to get in touch with Veronica Wang, who was our contact at CBS, and maybe perhaps negotiate being able to release this updated client for free on Steam. It's a fever dream. It's a very admittedly low possibility of this being able to happen, but we already have an existing agreement with them. We're hoping we might be able to leverage it.
Well, I might caution you on that because this new client, as you call it, is, if I recall it correctly, based on the GPL. And I'm not sure if from a legal point of view, you are able to combine it with a commercial game on Steam without making the entire game to be licensed under the GPL. I'm not sure. So the idea, I would love to see this. This is exactly what we would need, a game that is easily accessible via a big platform like Steam. Let's take GOG or something like that, for example. I believe it doesn't matter what the platform exactly is, but that people can notice it in their gaming environment they are used to play every day. But maybe there are some legal obstacles, so better recheck that and be careful with that.
We have a lawyer. We're looking into it.
Oh, so you have quite a long process already.
Yep, we're working on it. It's an uphill battle, but it's something that I think is worth fighting.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really good that you do this work.
So anyway, now that we have completely veered off topic, where were we supposed to be?
No, I don't think we are off topic, because basically we wanted to talk about the history of the game. So I think we are completely on topic.
Yeah, we just continued up to the present. I believe that's important. You get to know where you came from and especially where you want to go based on that. And this is the interesting part. Where do you want to go from here?
Good, let's move on. What special memories do you have about playing this game? For me, an example would be when I first got the demo of the game. I played it forever, basically. I think at least 8 times I played the demo, and it's basically just the first level on the holodeck, on the Borg cube. And I just replayed it every time. Do you have any funny stories?
Well, me personally, most of my experience with the Elite Force multiplayer, while I did play the arena shooter mode on and off, most of my multiplayer experience was actually on the role-playing community side of things. And I developed so many friendships that I still talk to these people to this day. And it's been a wonderful bonding experience for me socially online. And, you know, recently we've also started doing more game nights on the Hollow Match side of things, which has been very entertaining. But I think for me, my most treasured memory, I ran a series briefly where I played 2 characters on 2 different clients, one of whom is the most whimsical character idea I think I've ever come up with, where I used the Harvester skin, and I decided I'm going to make that the chef on the ship. And the level of broken English and general miscommunication and social mishaps and faux pas that happened was absolutely magical, and I really couldn't have gotten that anywhere else.
Well, as I already said, the early stages of multiplayer I never experienced because I didn't have any internet connection. So I mostly played the single player, and I'm probably not exaggerating if I say I played it 10 to 15 times entirely from stem to stern, kind of. And what was always fascinating, especially as a Star Trek fan, was simply moving on the Voyager. The expansion pack took it to a whole new level, as you could really explore the ship. But even before, it was just nice to use a tricorder on things on the ship to go through crew quarters and look for things there, and just to experience this track feeling by yourself, kind of if you are walking on the ship yourself. And this is, I believe, something that's simply adorable. I believe there are not many games that let you roam the ship freely. I'm not sure. I believe in Elite Force 2 they also did this with the Enterprise, but back then with the first part, Elite Force 1, this was simply whole new. And back at that time, it was, I believe you used the word magical. This is what describes it best. This feeling to be in a new world where you know it's not reality, of course, and it's just a game, but still it's just awesome.
Also for me, was it the first multiplayer experience ever. And back then, basically, you had a community who used the chat. Modern games don't use the chat. Nobody knows about it, basically. So you have this community built up in the game already, which was back then really amazing. Also playing via 56k modem was also a quite nice experience, which I don't miss that much. Let's go to the pros and cons. For me, a big pro is, of course, we have again a developer team which really loved Trek. The actors, the story, the environment, everything fitted to the Voyager series, the 6th season. It was just a perfect match, basically. And it still works basically out of the box after 20 years with no issue. If you compare that with Armada, it's really sad.
Oh yeah, I think Elite Force, just because you played it from a first-person perspective and you were the character and you were on the ship, I feel that it captured the imagination and attention of Star Trek fans more than the Armada games did. But I would say that actually Armada arguably has a more concrete presence in the community nowadays, where people are regularly organizing games for it.
But only because of Armada 3, I would say. Not because of the game is that popular or something. I guess they see, okay, there is a game which called Star Trek Armada. Where is the original root from it? And they look it up, basically.
Well, let's not discount the work that the Star Trek Fleet Operations team did. They still have an individual and very healthy community going on Discord.
Definitely. No, I didn't want to do that in any ways. Just if you look the online presence from the original Armada, it's kind of small.
Oh yeah.
I believe one of the biggest advantages really is, as you said, the game simply works. Aside maybe from the installer, this is the one obstacle if you know that there's another file on the install DVD or CD which you can use and it installs just fine, then everything is just cool with this game. I believe there are many titles which began to break when Windows XP was introduced, and then later with Windows Vista and Windows 7, same obstacles came up, but this game still works up to today. And quite nicely, I might add. I mean, it's from a technical point of view not too difficult, which probably is one of the reasons for its robustness. But still, it works, and it's still not, well, how to say, it has aged well, I believe. There are a lot of games from back then where you say, well, those graphics, not really nice looking. They may have been good back then, but today they are just ugly. This doesn't go for Elite Force, and I believe with the Vulcan technology, which is currently in development, their game might even look better than back then, and this is all no problem today. And this, I believe, one of the big advantages really is the boundaries or the obstacles around the game are rather low, so we can basically just play it.
Also, what's very good is the multiplayer. The balancing is very solid. They did a great job in making sure that everything is not too strong from the weapon side or from the item side. It's just very well balanced.
I only recently found out that the Infinity Modulator is capable of damaging players through the metaphasic shield. which I had no idea that was even a thing until last
It
week.
shoots through all kinds of shields. This is something I also didn't know for a long time, but if you take those portable shields, you can shoot through them. If you take the multiphasic shields, you can shoot through them. And of course, the personal shields of the players as well. It just ignores the shields. I was always thinking, well, man, what is the point of this weapon? I mean, it's just kind of a Starfleet rifle on crack. But at some point, I found out, yeah, it makes totally sense. This is a different weapon, which has a special feature, and it makes totally sense to have it.
So just go very quickly to the cons, because I say quickly, I don't have basically any. You could only say maybe it's a little bit too short in the single player aspect.
Well, you're right. The single player campaign is a little bit short. Cons for me would probably be that there are still some weapons, specifically the scavenger rifle and the compound grenade launcher, that I feel aren't quite as good or as powerful as the other weapons. But generally speaking, I think the weapon and item balance in Hollow Match is phenomenal. And the maps that they launched the game with are also really good. Con-wise, I think really just for me is just that the visuals aren't quite up to par with what you could get out of a modern shooter, but that's mostly just because it's a product of its time. I really don't have anything bad to say about it.
Well, and of course, one drawback is you cannot buy it new, even not with GOG or platforms that focus on older games. This would be an opportunity because the game still is great, even today, and technically speaking, it works just fine, and you cannot buy it newly, you just can get it via the second-hand market.
Yeah, and one thing about the maps. There is one map which I really love. Everybody hates. Saturn, I guess you already know which map. Breach. I like the design of the map, but because most bots can't use it, it's pointless. Or even most players can't use it.
Well, not even discounting the difficulties the bots have with it. I think Breach, Create, and the other indoor Hollow Match maps like HM Void 1, HM Void 2, and Boarding Party, the Capture the Flag map, they create a different gameplay than the outdoor maps do because you don't have access to bunny hopping as a movement option. And I don't know if you two have ever done this, but the Quake 3 engine and a lot of early Source engine games have this sort of momentum exploit where if you jump forwards at a diagonal angle, there really isn't a cap on how much speed you can gain. So you can move extremely quickly by jumping repeatedly on these outdoor maps that don't have ceilings. But in maps like Breach and the ones that I mentioned before, because the ceilings are so low, you can't build up the momentum. So it's a lot lower of a skill ceiling on those maps compared to others like CTF Void 2.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky to get this to work, to do the bunny hopping. And funny part is there were other games also based on the Quake 3 engine that take this to an even higher level than that. Take Nexus, with the original Dark Places engine, bunny hopping is an integral part of this game, and of course in Elite Force you can miss this, and yeah, of course also in this map. But I believe this isn't the only problem with that map. I mean, it's narrow. The items are a little bit too scarce, I believe, and in general, if you have not enough players, then you are always looking for someone. If there are too many players, you're running into them. It's just havoc for everyone. It's kind of chaotic on the one hand side, and kind of too big or too how to say. It's difficult to find others. Then again,
next point would be what made this game unique. We talked a lot about plug and play aspects and walking on the first time basically on a Federation ship, but also what really was amazing back then, and I would say even today, is that you could choose your gender in the single player campaign. I don't know of any game now out of my mind which does that.
Oh, Mass Effect definitely made that popular nowadays.
Oh yeah, damn it, you caught me. Yeah, of course, every RPG game. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, RPGs, sure. But I mean, in first-person shooters, that was really uncommon back in the day. But what I I think was the unique draw is that, I mean, even among the Star Wars games that were coming out around that time, I don't think any of them came close to the level of immersion that Elite Force did, especially with the Virtual Voyager expansion pack. Like, that game went out of its way to make you feel like you were this crew member on the ship and that this was something that was happening on the show that was still on the air at the time. And the integration between the setting and the gameplay was just so seamless that I think Raven Software really hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I believe this is the most prominent feature of the entire game. I mean, it already starts when you are opening the game. You're not just opening some lobby or some menu. No, it is an LCARS menu. So it's made in the style of the computer graphical interfaces taken from Star Trek. And you go into the game, and you have this living on a starship, this moving on a starship, and it doesn't even end there. The weapons are taken from it and even expanded on this in a believable style. I mean, there are, I believe, 3 foreign weapons, but for example, the grenade launcher makes entirely sense. The iMod makes entirely sense if you consider it is derived from Borg technology. And they really took the ideas that were behind Star Trek and even expanded them a little bit, and I believe they did quite well. You might say on a negative aspect, well, it's just Quake 3 with a new skin or something like that, but that doesn't do it justice. It does a lot more than that, I believe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It went the extra mile to feel like it was specially crafted from the ground up to be a part of this greater franchise. It's not just some low effort cash grab. Like, a lot of heart and soul went into it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 was also basically the same engine and everything. They also had a good world building and everything, but what they didn't have, what you mentioned, was that this inclusion in the whole world, basically, that you could walk on a ship and explore and everything. This was really unique. Yeah, next one would be what could a sequel do better? What do you have in mind?
Oh, God, so much. Well, I mean, let's just start with the low-hanging fruit. Obviously, it would be a huge visual upgrade, regardless of what engine it was on. But I think the biggest thing that could be addressed in a modern-day Elite Force game, I think Elite Force 2, in a lot of aspects, laid a pretty decent foundation for what a modern Elite Force could look like, especially with adding puzzle-solving elements like the tricorder, power relay connections, and things like that. I'd love to see more integration with the world like that. And I think, generally speaking, a campaign that would be set on a completely different ship that perhaps we're not familiar with would be the best move to take. Because as much as we're attached to characters like Captain Janeway and Captain Picard and Tuvok and the like, I think they could really go pretty boldly, no pun intended, by taking the franchise in a familiar but different direction that sort of focuses on a deep space exploration mission with its own hazard team, seeing things that we've never seen before. I think that would be the best direction to take. Maybe a little bit more interaction on the starship itself, too.
But one of the complaints, I would say, from Elite Force 2 is that you have to fight these generic aliens, which never were mentioned in the franchise before. And the many great aliens we already had were basically just side missions. You just saw them, but hadn't much interaction with them. I think this they should also have in mind when they do a sequel.
Well, I would have to agree on that. I'm not sure if we are going to do a video on Elite Force 2.
Oh, yes.
But in general, I would say a combination of the 2 games would be just awesome. I mean, you already said it, the opponents in Elite Force 2 were rather uninteresting. And the story was, well, okay. But what they really added was this kind of a roleplay element. You could talk to people, maybe even certain decisions affected the outcome of the entire game.
Yep, and if you chose Clea over Telsia, you were a traitor.
For example. And the funny part is, this was mostly missing in Elite Force 1. I believe there were no real decisions. You could play tunnel-like map. This is something I would really have to criticize. The campaign was okay, but it was walking like through a tunnel. You didn't have really a really big way to decide anything. Of course, you could roam around the Voyager and look into quarters and something like that. But when it came to the actual game story, it was like a series of events you really didn't have any influence on. And of course, the solving puzzles aspect and then including the tricorder a lot more was a sound idea. And you could build up on it, making a combination of the two. The setting of the first part, kind of an emergency and with a distinct topic. And on the other hand, those role play kind of elements that spiced up the second part, I believe. And of course, a technical upgrade. That would be nice for me.
It's good that you mention so intensively the second part, because I didn't wrote this down. Of course, a co-op mod. A new Elite Force needs a co-op mod already included.
Oh yeah, I'd love that. I mean, the hardcore fans of Elite Force 2 probably all know this. There is a co-op mod for Elite Force 2 created by the community, by a certain individual of the community. And today, I believe it would really be a sound idea to make missions experienceable, to be experienced by multiple players doing the missions together. This would really be cool.
And I also have two more things on my list to say. I would like more cannon weapons, like Klingon disruptors, for example, or the different phaser rifles we saw in the different series. I was kind of sad that they didn't include in Elite Force the phaser rifle from Voyager. It was only edited via mods later.
Yeah, there was it was more based on the rifle from First Contact rather than the one from the actual show.
Which I also prefer as a rifle, but set into Voyager Season 6, it would have looked nice if it would be the real phaser rifle from Voyager. Also, I really missed in a multiplayer a bomb mode like CS. For example, you have to plant a bomb near the warp core of an enemy ship and have to beam over there and also defend, of course, your side. At least this was always the experience I wish I would have got in an update or in a sequel. So let's move on to our next section. Of which hidden features do you know of?
Oh yeah, I mean, even in the single player mode, I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but there are unfinished item pickups for the tricorder and the hypo spray in Elite Force's single player, and you can access them, I think, in Chapter 6 inside sickbay near the morgue. You can pick them up, and it's clear that they're not finished, and they're not supposed to be in the game, but they're still there as like an Easter egg. In the virtual Voyager mode, there's so much like optional stuff that you can do that gets pretty hilarious reactions out of the characters. Like, I'm sure we've all tried it, but when you're on the bridge and you use Seven's console to put the ship in a red alert and then Chakotay freaks out at you, little things like that.
I'm not sure if you can count this as a Easter egg, but of course the side story. You could talk with the people. The other characters were talking amongst each other as well. And in principle, there were stories going on beside the actual story. And they even created secondary parts of the story which had no real bearing on the actual game. But they included it, and well, not sure if you can count it as an Easter egg because it's in plain sight kind of, but if you listen carefully, there were even social things going on and even romances, and yeah, it adds to the flair.
Definitely. Did you know that not most, but many names from the Hazard team were the real names from the developers?
Oh yeah, the transporter chief in particular, Pelletier, I think.
Yeah, Odell or Beastman.
Yeah, Beastman, yeah.
Or Chang, most of them were based on actual team members of the development team.
Oh yeah, and then one that I didn't figure out until years later, which was that the HM Raven map. For some reason in my head, I was like, oh, it's like, you know, it's Seven's parents' ship. But then it was like, oh wait, no, this is actually the Raven Studios building mapped out with Elite Force assets, which for some reason didn't even click to me until like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and Spheres is mentioning the head developer was James Monroe.
I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but there's even, at least on some versions of the game, an additional installer with even more maps, which are not included by the standard install routine.
We also found on the CD a kind of database, wiki-like information system about the whole game. The weapons, the items, how many frags you need for the achievements, everything.
Huh. I had no idea that there was like an actual internal reference for that.
Yeah, me neither. We just found it last year. And also I found on the net that there is a small mission on the Voyager where you can visit your quarter and find a pad with Vulcan Love Slave 3 Ponfar. And of course you can't read it.
Yep. And the funny thing is that doesn't change depending on whether you're Alexander or Alexandria Monroe.
Well, you can't discuss taste. You already know this, I'm sure. If you friendly fire on the ship and survive 30 seconds, you will get into the brig, and it follows a list of characters who will visit you and basically tell you how disappointed they are with you killing a teammate.
Oh yeah, and sometimes the dialogue changes depending on which crew member you killed.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining.
Well, on the other hand, on a side note, if you play the game with cheats, you notice certain things that you aren't exactly aware, but from a game development point of view, they are sound. For example, if you go through the missions, you will notice that the enemies will focus their fire on you. And you can even turn this off with a cheat. And this makes it really interesting because you never really notice this probably until you read it somewhere. Because you always think, well, my teammates are attacked as well. Yeah, that's true, but primarily they will shoot you, they will attack you, and playing the game without this factor makes it completely different.
But do you know why this is?
Well, of course, that you get some action. Imagine the characters will get killed too easily. I mean, if you take too long, you can avoid the enemies rather easily by moving intelligently. The bots really never do this, and they can get killed rather easily, and you would lose them really easily this way.
If it's true, found it on a website that developers had problems with the AI. The AI was always too good and killed all of the enemies, leaving nothing for the player to do. Then they made the team less effective, which resulted in the enemies killing everybody. The solution was to make them a little bit less effective, and the enemy always targets the player and not the rest of the team. I don't know if it's true, but a funny story, I think.
I think it figures. As I said, consider you would have the non-playable characters just shoot each other up, then you would end up with no team in no time. This is something you will experience if you turn off this attacking of the actual human player.
There was some cut content. Originally planned that Forrester will be assimilated and later helps you fighting the Forge boss. Only the problem was they had problems with the AI and some time problems, so they had to scrap this. But I really would like that ending.
Well, that's the ending that they went with in the comic book adaptation that they did with Wildstorm. So that was definitely something that made its way to some form of Elite Force, even if it wasn't the game.
Oh, it's good to hear. At least something. Good. I think the last agenda would be mods.
Oh no, don't even get me started.
Did you play the graphic overhaul project?
No, although judging from the footage I've seen on stream, some things look great, other things like Seven and Janeway's faces will keep me awake at night. It looks very crisp in parts, but other parts not so much. It's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. So to that end, I think I might prefer the original visuals just because at least it's all consistent.
Yeah, it's just one German guy who does this in his free time, and I have the impression he abandoned the project, but the textures of the L cars and the Borg cube and everything, it's really nice. It's amazing what he did in this free time.
Yeah, I mean, I can especially see the details that I've seen in the footage on the stream, where the lights from the red alert emergency lights actually like reflect a little bit on the textures around them, which is a nice touch that wasn't in the original game.
But this is why I say a light version of New Elite Force would also be just fine with me. Just re-release pretty much the same game, but upgrade the entire physics and graphics engine, redoing it and maybe add a small portion of new content. And I bet you this game would sell well even today.
I would say even better, because back then not many people had internet and could never experience a multiplayer like that. Did you guys ever play Starbase 11?
No, although I've seen the footage on your channel and it looks like it was really well made, especially the segment I saw where I guess you fight against a Romulan fighter. That looked really interesting.
It's a really big starbase. You see so many different aspects of the Starbase 11, which was briefly shown in TOS back then, and he expanded it so much. He also included starships in orbit, which you could also visit. So you could go on basically the whole Enterprise, or have, I think, 20 or 30 different holodeck missions, or how to say it, entertainment programs, like Spock singing to you a version of The Lord of the Rings.
That's pretty hilarious. I most of my modding experience with Elite Force is on the multiplayer side of things, between playing and developing, because my big forte was the RPGX mod. I did some source code contribution and application packaging, and some small-scale content development like new player skins and retextures and things along those lines.
Well, I'm not too much into modding, but some particular mod I found just a nice idea was the pinball mod. I'm not sure if you know this. In usual shooters, the job is, well, shoot the guy and he's at some point out of health points, and then he's killed and you get a frag and you go on like that. But in this game it's a little bit different. Yeah, you can shoot a guy, but the actual weapons hit doesn't do any damage. It doesn't damage the opponent if you just hit him. The goal is to push him out of the map or against certain elements of the map. And this is funny because, well, in a way it's really like the name says, as like in a pinball machine. You are the ball and you are being reflected by walls, you are being targeted by your enemies and bounced around. And it is really a different gameplay altogether, because it doesn't help if you just hit the guy. It doesn't make any difference because, well, he's just standing a few meters further then. And this mod put it into Elite Force, and this especially would be something which I would love to see in a new Elite Force game as well, because it is a concept that isn't seen very often in other games. Could be expanded on, maybe.
Sphere in the chat also mentions Colony 7, which was a great single-player mod with basically a good story.
I worked a little bit on integrating some of the multiplayer maps into RPGX, but I personally never got to try it.
Well, there's also the Captain Proton mod, which I never finished because it's so hard. It's so unfair sometimes. But you could play all the Captain Proton adventures in the same style, basically, as we saw on the show. It was also nice. There are many different good projects out there. I never played it, for example, the Virtual Dreadnought, I think it is called, where you could also explore a whole TOS starship.
The level of effort some people put into these mods is absolutely insane.
Oh yeah, definitely. They are sometimes really crazy, but I love them.
Well, now that you're mentioning it, what's also really interesting is the number of selectable characters you can choose for yourself in the multiplayer. And people were doing a lot of skins back then, of course nude skins as well, as it always happens. But for example, the old series, the original series Crew, you could use characters from that as well, made by other people. And in general, I find the variety of selectable characters, even in the vanilla game, astonishing. They really took the time to pick people like Boothby or like Constance Goodhart from the Captain Proton universe, inside the Star Trek universe, and which brings me again back to, well, those guys really did their homework and even took characters which have no bearing on the game at all. But instead of just using some generic characters like many other development teams, they really took characters known from the franchise and integrated it into the game.
Yeah, which brings us back. The developer really loved the Star Trek franchise. You can see it basically everywhere. The library, as example, in the virtual Voyager, where you can read basically the entire history of the whole crew. How much effort this is.
Yep, including Tom Paris's Warp 10 flight that turned him into a space lizard. You heard it here first, folks. Threshold is officially canon.
Yeah, with this, I would say let's bring it to an end. This review is going on long enough.
Oh yeah, it's been a little bit over time.
Just one drop here. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Like always, leave us a comment. Tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. And contact us, please. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good day.